So what happened to Salmon that caused a lot of the issues and took years to develop? Why is Silver going to be remade in 2029? What's the latest with the R2 Cosmic series? All these questions and more are answered with my interview with Chris Pitt. And this one's been one of my favorites to date. And when I was going through and editing it, I just decided to kind of put it up in its entirety. So this is a long interview. But I really think a lot of the idiosyncrasies and little stories that Chris discusses during our interview is really kind of important to get an inside look at how Chris and Revomaze HQ operate. So I think it's really important. I hope that most of you would appreciate, a lot of what he says during this interview. So, it was really great, again, on the long side, so almost 2-hour interview, but, it was great, and I really appreciate Chris talking with me. And during some of the video, there are a few, discussions where he mentioned specific components of the Revomazes, and I decided to censor them. And to kind of give you a glimpse why, he talks about it a little bit more, but in summary, when the blue came out is when he established the form, and a lot of the secrecy behind not releasing the solutions wasn't Chris or his idea. It was actually kind of driven by the community. So this puzzle came out, as essentially a toy, and all of a sudden, this community kind of grew from it. So, I think, during our long talk, I think we, get carried away, but I think some of those things that may not readily be a spoiler to him, especially after working in it, the community may consider a spoiler. So especially when you're talking about specific components and dynamic components of mazes. So to be on the safe side, I just decided to censor them. So that's what you'll see, in this video, little blips here and there. Also, we spent a lot of time talking about the Revomaze obsession. So from this video, I'm actually going to be giving away this blue V1 obsession. To enter, all I have to do is be subscribed to my YouTube channel and be a member of the Revomaze Discord. So put the link below in the description. And if you want to help out, I'm also putting a link to the Revomaze Discord GoFundMe. So 100% of the money donated goes to these giveaways. So, this one, for instance, I'm not affiliated with Revomaze HQ. All these giveaways are 100% of my own pocket. So, if you like these giveaways, you want to, see them keep coming, feel free to donate and help me out. Again, link below if you want to donate. So again, I'll choose probably at the end of August is when I will give the blue Revomaze away. That's when I'll kind of be back in town. So without further ado, here is my interview with Chris Pitt. I have Chris Pitt here with me. So Chris, thanks for joining me. Good seeing you again.
Hello, welcome.
Yeah, how are things going over there? You guys keeping busy? I know that COVID have kind of kept you guys up and down and in and out of the office, so I know it's been challenging.
Yeah, we've this week we've had to be working from home because of COVID. So yeah, I got pinged because last week I must have been near somebody that's got it, and this app pings up to say you've got to self-isolate, which basically it's very difficult to self-isolate when you've got people here, so the team had to work from home and I basically was working on my own. So, but that's the challenge we have today, which is a shame really, but we get on with it.
Yeah. No, I mean, my company, which is a larger company, has trouble. So I can't imagine how even a smaller company like yours deals with it. But as I want to kind of jump into what's going on now and all that stuff. But I'll take a step back and we'll start at the beginning and kind of work our way forwards. So you've been designing puzzles for God knows how many years. So how did you kind of get into the puzzling world, or even like your first puzzle or first design? I mean, how did that all kind of start for you?
Right. I'm not a puzzler. First of all, I'm like everybody else. You see things like the Rubik's Cube and games at Christmas and all the rest of it, and you just want to pick it up and have a little play with and put down again. But technically, I'm not actually a hardcore puzzler. I got roped into it a little bit by accident. There's a guy that I worked with who is like a competitor. He effectively got me commissioned with him to do another project in electronics, nothing to do with puzzles whatsoever. And I got to know him because I actually solved his puzzle, which is the ISIS. And because I solved it, I was intrigued to have a chat. And he had an electronics thing that he wanted to do, which is the Revomaze. And we just sort of got chatting from there, really. But to support his business model and what have you, he needed sort of like income through his puzzle creation. So he showed me a pyramid, and that pyramid effectively was just a few things sitting on top of each other. It didn't actually do anything. So I said to him, I'll come up with an idea for you if you like. So I drew this idea up, and then I made a prototype just to show him the concept. And from there, it sort of went weird because I sort of like got involved with something which I wasn't quite au fait with, even though I've got an engineering background. The machinery that I've got here was such that I wanted to, try to make something for myself, some prototyping items. And I came up with this concept, which I put together, and we went with it. We got a company to actually start partially making it, but it immediately showed me what can go wrong, because too many parts, too many things, and then suddenly you're finding that you're getting things back from a plater, and everything that's nice and tight has become very loose, because the plating company strips some material off and it makes everything move around. So you have to be very wary of things like tolerances and bits and pieces. So I learned effectively how not to do something. But the guy, I didn't like his ethos. He liked his pyramid of people. He liked the bottom tiers which were feeding him, but he only dealt with the people at the top, the small minority of people who supported him. So I prefer to, have a broadness approach. People who enjoy puzzles, whether you're a grandmother or a young child or even an adult. I wanted something more broadband, broad-based, but he didn't want that. He liked his way of going about things. So
kind of like two musicians, you don't always see eye to eye on the type of music or the style kind of thing. So
precisely.
Yeah.
And I wasn't actually there for that reason either. I was there for an electronics project to do with credit cards and stuff. So it had nothing to do with this. And that project, I was led to believe, was a lot further down the line. He had all the patents in place and blah, blah, blah. And it all transpired that he hadn't. And people that are investing, heavily in either time, in my case, or people putting money into the project, it just didn't feel right. So I actually decided to part company with him, especially as he hadn't paid me either. So I wanted to create a puzzle which could have been another one in his series, but this puzzle I wanted to create for myself. So it was something that was around when I was 16. I came up with an idea or concept because of an error. When I was doing my engineering, I was doing broad-based engineering, and that meant I had to do some lathe work and milling work and stuff like that. And we made some screwdriver handles, for screwdrivers that we made. And I made a bit of a cock up on the handle rather than having nice slots where the grip is. I ended up with the cutter going too deep and then pulling along and turning it, and it left this groove behind. And I thought maybe a ball bearing running on that groove in a sleeve might be an idea. And that's where the concept was. And when I actually got a piece of kit from a school, which is a very simple milling machine, I got a dividing head. And this dividing head allowed me to actually divide into 50 units. And it stemmed from there. It started on Christmas Day with a drawing with a bit of graph paper. I drew 50 squares equaling 1.5 millimeters each square. Using a 3 millimeter cutter on a 1-inch bar meant that I had a circumference of 75. So it also worked out. And then I had a bit of 2-inch aluminium that I had for a sleeve. And that sleeve I used to put the shaft into. And I needed it to be quite thick because I wanted to be able to put the thing together quickly. Whereas in the past, mazes that are hidden, people have to go through the maze to get to the start. And if you've got to do that and you have to then undo it to come back out again, I wanted something quick and easy to get to the start very rapidly. So you remember things in your past, like, for instance, snakes and ladders. You hit a snake and suddenly you're sliding down. So you think, well, let's put a groove in. So this groove was a bit deeper, and to fall into it meant the pin had to be sprung loaded. And it's that concept which is the whole basis of Revomaze, and why it sort of separated itself from the others, which tended to be more like a fixed pin, or something like that, where it's solid, and meant that once you're in the maze, you don't know where you're at, and you're literally just guessing, and you put it down, and you think, well, trying to get out or what have you, and trying to draw it was a lot more flattened. Whereas the Revomaze, if by having these traps and then adding a few extras, meant that people had to go around a maze without falling into these traps that sent you straight back to the beginning. And when I first put it together, after making it on Boxing Day, I was so chuffed to put it together, and then all of a sudden realized I hadn't photographed it. So I thought, well, I've got the drawing and the rest of it. It shouldn't take long to actually undo, because it went together very easy. I thought, oh, blimey, it's clicked and it's turning, click, oh, great, that clicking sound. And then suddenly realized, how do I open this thing? So I started to open it, and it took me over 2 hours to actually open. But once I got it open again, rather than photographing it, I put it back together again. And the second time was in minutes. It's a lot quicker. And I thought, hey, this is easy to put together. There's only a couple of parts and a spring and what have you. I thought, well, this could be a nice puzzle to actually put on the marketplace. So I ended up putting it on eBay. I put the first 12 I was going to make on eBay, and it's sort of like
this first prototype that you had with this, this thick aluminum sleeve, was it pretty raw, just a aluminum sleeve, or did it have like the machine grooves into it and the beveled edges, things like that?
No, it's just a smooth shaft, and the sleeve was just smooth at that point. I wanted to actually, once I had the thing working, I put the grooves in primarily to make it look like rings. So it looked a bit like the cryptics, which is like the thing from the Da Vinci Code. And by having the grooves in and a slot for the label was covering up where the pin hole was. Even though the pin spring hole was visible under the label, the actual action is actually on the other side, which was completely concealed, which meant that when the actual puzzle was together, you had to go to the end to get it open. You couldn't sort of like cheese it. So yeah, it started off with that. And then the idea of putting a 7-sided on the end was so that people didn't spanners on it. Yeah. I wanted something to grip and have it slightly different. So I made it a 7-sided, and it looked nice at the time. And that generally how it all sort of formed into its shape. And I put a couple of bands on the side of the sleeve and had it step down just to give it a bit of a look. And that look, I suppose, is, even though we've changed the design once, people still prefer the original. So we went back to the original, because the V2 was used more for the plastic than it was for
I have to admit, I do like the look of the V1. Something about it, again, I've said this before, like looking like a hand grenade. I don't know, it just appeals to me. I don't know. I appreciate it. I don't know.
But yeah, so in effect, then on the Boxing Day, I had this puzzle, and I had, how do I market it? First of all, is that I realized how I made it, so I needed to find someone who could make it, and I looked up various engineering firms that can do 5-axis, and eventually I came to a company that says you don't need 5-axis, you need a sliding head machine. And what's a sliding head? And then you realize it's a lathe which the material moves rather than the cutters. The cutters for more accuracy and speed. And he said, we'll try that out for you and make that. But I showed him the drawing and he didn't understand it. He said, this doesn't seem to work. I can't understand how this actually works in general. So I went down and saw him and showed him the prototype that I made. And he said, could you leave it with me over the weekend? And I said, yeah, I'll be back Monday then to go through it with you. Unbeknown to me, he took it straight to his pub where he he frequents, and everyone in the pub tried it, and no one could undo it at all. And came in Monday with him saying this can't be done. And I go, what do you mean it can't be done? Yeah, this is really difficult. And I said, like that, you mean? And I just opened it up in front of him. Yeah. And when he saw that, he realized, after hours of work, between him and his colleagues and stuff, and friends, what a great puzzle it was. And he absolutely loved it. So we started to work on it. And it's from the working side of things that we move forward about putting these things together. So
really quick, taking a step back. So before that, when you go from the Ramesis to this, how long was it before, you had that idea of the Revomaze before you made the first prototype? Was it the span of like 6 months, a year or two, or how long did it take before you kind of started machining it around Boxing Day?
Well, around about Boxing Day, sort of January and February time. So in effect, I thought, right, I can now get my 12 out. So I wanted to get the 12 out. And those 12 were the ones I put up on eBay, and it got people talking about it. And those individuals, a guy called Steve Cornett, which is very prolific in the puzzling world, who absolutely adored the guy that I was basically breaking away from. And he tried slating it straight from the word go and saying how he can solve it in seconds and, blah, 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 blah. So he bought one, and I got it out to him, and he said to everybody, hey, I've got this puzzle, wait for a few minutes, I'll have it open, you can basically see how crap it is, sort of thing. Yeah. We didn't hear from him for a week, and then eventually came back this week, and he wrote one of the best reviews, about the puzzle, and the fact about the small things that matter to him, and the fact that this puzzle is such a conceptual change to what he's used to, and how he enjoyed it so much solving it that he just had to, write about it. So if you can imagine one of the worst critics you can have suddenly, rather than being a critic anymore, is an absolute ally. He suddenly realized himself that the puzzle's great. And that sort of got the ball going, really. We started off with a few puzzles, and it just grew. But it's within November, December, then January, February that we actually got the blue.
Okay,
ready.
so it was a pretty quick time frame. Well,
yeah.
No time frame of reference, but yeah.
The reason why the blue is so, even now, still the classic, is for the fact that the blue is easy to make. It's straightforward. There's no clever bits, and people wanted more and more. And this is one that we'll move on to this later on, but they enjoyed it because they first of all looked at it and underestimated it. And that's the biggest feedback that I got from everybody, that people saying how much they thought it was going to be easy to do, and then they got into it and realized controlling your mind and your hands and doing the coordination to get around the maze without falling was such an interesting thing. And it was, everyone got to the same point very rapidly, to the same little bit. And that little bit basically was the bit that got everybody hooked for a few hours. And once they got over it, their face lit up, because it's all this highs and lows, and then this can't be done. This can't be, oh, I've done it, and this eye reaction, and I've just done it, and I have to explain I've just done it, and then click, oh, it's gone down again. So I've got to get back to that bit again. And then suddenly they find the end is really rapidly got there. And as soon as they get it open, it's great. And there's a guy on a train, which is one of the early guys. He managed to do it, and he literally jumped up and screamed, yeah, he'd done this thing. And everyone looked at him weird on the train, but he got back down to it and, try to finish it off, and he just finished it off as he's coming to the station. And we tell people to just turn it over and just tap, but he had nothing to tap it on, so he took his shoe off as he's getting out, hopping on one leg, tapping it just to get the thing, and it opened up on the platform. And he absolutely had to tell everybody about this experience he had. And that, you think to yourself, hang on a minute, we're talking about a plaything, it's a toy at the end of the day, and it's affecting people. It's affecting, this belief of, can I do it, can't I do it? And then they can do it, and then all of a sudden, well, at the end of the day, is that it's a challenge for them that they have to have. You get the trophy hunters, you get the people who have to have the ability to solve the puzzle. Then you get the challengers, the people who want to say, I'm faster than you, I can do this quicker than you, sort of thing. And then you have the collectors, people who just love shiny objects, and well-made engineered things. And you get these people suddenly coming out of the woodwork, which was a hidden society as such. and they start talking to each other for, and it's a bit like petrol heads, you get cars and things, and people like to start talking about the engineering side of things, what they've done to their car and how they've made it better. And it's quite a community, and I'm absolutely gobsmacked after 13 years that this community is still going strong and the people are there still around. But the thing is, though, is that when something new comes on, there's a big buzz, and that buzz really is quite. It's like any industry. If you're in the music industry and you create a record and that record is liked by people, then you end up saying to people, hey, do you like my music? And you think, great. But unless you start coming out with the next track and the next track,
you do the sophomore album, the next album. Yep.
Yeah, it's got to keep going, and it's suddenly either goes downhill or goes uphill or whatever. It's there's only a few out there that sort of like have lingering people, but these people that have dedicated themselves to it are really that dedicated, and people sort of come in and join a long way in and say, I wish I'd seen this when it first started, but it doesn't matter. People can still enjoy the same journey that everybody else has been on. It's just that you've got an extended journey now. You're in different directions you can go in. But from the initial makeup, the design was such that I could put this maze together quickly and rapidly. You can't see what you're doing at all, and you can't cheat it. You can't put feeler gauges or something to try and open it, which I think everybody tried at different points. And you set up the community so they can talk using the forum that we had, which was the BBS. And the forum itself, we designed in such a way that you had the general people just chatting, then you've got the people that are owning, that are doing it, and then you've got the people that have actually finished it and opened it. And we made it secret that people could only join the open group, once they've actually physically opened and proved it. And the ones in the actual people who are doing it are saying, this can't be done. And people are saying, yes, it can. And then you get people who set up a thread saying, my son was so disappointed with this puzzle, he has solved it in 5 seconds, not realizing it's the first trap that you got into. So it feels as if you're pulling it and think, I've solved it. No, you've got to get around the whole maze yet. And everybody sort of comes back and says, yeah, it's that first reset that you click into that gives you that optimism that you can get to the end quickly, but then suddenly realize there's a lot more to it. And then when you see how much more you've got to do to get around, you feel as if you've earned your stripes, time to get to the end of the puzzle. That happens.
Now, did you create the forum right when blue came out, or was this a little bit further down the road when we had green and bronze?
I think it came out initially with the blue, and then obviously we started chatting with various people, because one of the things about this puzzle is that I was very heavily involved at the beginning, simply because I'd like talking to them. They're great guys. They really were. Chris Pitt and all the rest of it. They were really into their puzzles in a big way, but sort of kept it to themselves to a certain degree. But now they've got an outlet that can really sort of allow them to talk about things a bit more. It was very clear at the beginning that I didn't want to sort of restrict people from being able to sort of say what they'd like. So I gave over the ownership of the actual forum to the users. I set Chris up as the administrator who basically prepared it all and helped get it going. Nigel Crute joined in as well as an administrator, and a few others. And that little group really started to sort of snowball and build up what was then the Midlands Puzzle Party. But up until now, the word puzzle party meant a group of individuals that are invited around the world on the international puzzle party scene. They come in and they bring puzzles that they design and exchange them with others and things like that. And that concept sort of snowballed into ours to a certain degree. We saw the forum set up in that sort of light. It was very well managed, but because the fact that I didn't say this is the world's hardest puzzle, it's the best challenge out there, and you can really enjoy the challenge. People suddenly who used to rip these things apart and then post them on the internet didn't. They suddenly find that they started to protect it a little bit and start to say, keep going, you get there. And when you get there, show us your maps and show us what you've done and how you opened it and how you felt when you opened it. And you go to the open group and talk to others that have done the same. and sharing the same experience. And it's saying this is one of the most rewarding puzzles because the fact it's so progressive. You get to the end and you want to do it again, whereas a lot of the others, you just feel, oh, done it, right, trophy, next one. They want to have another crack at it and say, right, let's do it again and again and again, and show people they can do it. And that's where it all sort of snowballed out of. Now, moving from there, does it go on to the next? People saying, give us another maze. We've solved this one, we want another one to crack. So the green came out relatively quickly. We're talking a couple of months after that one. And we started to work on the bronze at that point.
Yep, and we'll keep no spoilers on this interview. So,
yeah. So the green was next, and the engineering company and I were always down. It was about a couple of hours, 3 or 4 hours away that I had to go to. So I had to go down and stay down there and talk to this guy called Adrian, who was really good, and another guy called Don. He was really into it and how he's doing it, but they had very sophisticated machinery, and part of that, they also had some software. And that then moved me on to the next layer, which is of what we can do with these puzzles and where we can go with it. So going through the early stages, the blue was getting noticed. It was also getting feedback from people, and one of the feedbacks was blue hands, or the blue hand syndrome. And the reason why it's blue hand is because we didn't take the maze down below the surface, and parts of the maze where you cut was sticking up and it was scraping the inside of the sleeve, and that was then coming out, resulting in people's hands turning blue because it's like the blue powder.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
So we started to get feedback, and that feedback I was really keen to listen to, because by hearing what people were saying, you immediately want to improve, make the puzzle better. And it's that improvement process by what the people were saying is my, it's where I've been. I'm a problem solver. That's rather than a puzzler. I like solving problems. So listening to what people are saying, you want to try and help by solving those problems and then come up with a solution that works and people enjoy it. The rest of it was down to process. If I wanted to make changes, I had this great relationship where I've got a dedicated person, an engineering firm, allowing me to get to their machinery, and we can spend weekends setting these things up. That was later on becoming harder and harder to get, and some other decisions that were made and how we move forward and what have you is stemming from the overriding success of the early stages. It's a high demand, people getting interested, people who have said that it's no good, oh, this is easily done, started to come back saying how wonderful it was. And all of that, it's like you come up with a hit record that suddenly everybody wants to listen to your style of music and blah, blah. It's the same with this puzzle. They just want us to find out, more about it. And yeah, it picked me up and carried me along for a while, to the point where the blue itself became above me. It became solely looked after by the community. They want to protect it and have done for an extremely long period of time. And again, we can talk later on about how the protection, and how people view it. It's important to them, because it became such that everything immediately came on the internet and said that this is how you do it. People were x-raying things and stuff like that and showing exactly what goes on inside other puzzles, whereas ours, they were saying, no, take that down, delete that, and they're actually getting people to actually, join the community and enjoy the people that are there. And that's where it all came to. So, yeah.
So then you kind of came along with the green and kind of incorporated some additional changes from blue. I'm an engineer too, so it's additional things like, okay, so maybe the tolerances I could tighten up or change a little bit to improve this, or tweak that a little bit, and you kind of roll that into the green, and then kind of go from there, right?
Yeah. What happened was the next stage was people starting to notice that I was putting a lot of torture out there. People are getting sore hands, and they've been working on these things dedicated, and the engineers got to hear about this as well, and they listened to what was going and being said, and they decided to create a puzzle for me, and put me for it. So one day I went in there and he goes, have a go at this. And it was just a plain sleeve with a maze in it. I thought, right, okay, this is a puzzle for you. Okay. So I sat down and went home with it and tried it out and thought, let's time everything like everybody else goes through and see how long it takes me. And then I went through what everyone else is going through. It's progression, it's writing it down, but it was working in a different way to how I did it. You pull it and it turns and twists at the same time. You think, so there's a curve in there somewhere. There's something not quite right. It's turning and twisting and pulling at the same time. So you think, oh, okay. And what they had done for me was the black. The
So this is
Revomaze
the black V1, right?
V1, and
Okay.
this black V1 was just made for me and to put me through it, and it did. It took me 2.5 hours to crack, and I spent quite a bit of time and effort putting it down, picking it up, sketching it like everybody else does, and eventually I got the damn thing open, and I thought, oh, I can understand the relief of getting to the end and thinking, wow, that was a journey. And I said to the guys when I came back on the following Monday, I said, look, you've got to make these. Let's make a special run. So we made this special run of 20. And I said, look, we're going to make it so that it's only 20. You know, once it's done, destroy the program. So we can't make any more of these things.
Now,
And that's
at
what
what, sorry to interrupt. So at what stage, like, had you just done green at this stage, or had you done bronze or any others?
No, we did the blue and green only.
Okay,
This
and then
black
this came in.
along. Yeah. And what he did, he showed me the drawing he made using this CAD software that was on a flat surface. So the actual maze was flat. And his software wrapped it around a cylinder. And it was that wrapping that did the automatic, you know, curves and all the rest of it. So he into the actual puzzle. That's the the black puzzle. And that's why it had curves in there. And that's why things were going off at an angle. And it was really strange. So I just so in awe of this, how he did it so easily. I thought, right, let's move on and make these 20. So he made 22. He actually made 0, which was the first one. I thought, right, I'll take the 0. Then we make 20 odd. And then he says, right, I'd like to have one as well. So for his cabinet. So he made 22. So we ended up with 22. And then he did what he said. He deleted his program from his machine. So yeah, okay, you could easily go back to the software and redo it and all the rest of it. But the purpose being is that we wanted it so that those 20 were the only 20 out there. And we made these special. And I sold them, I think, for 50 quid each, you know, at the time. And, you know, they're the people that are there the longest, you know, the sort of grew up with me at the beginning. And they took these blacks and yeah, it showed the collecting side of people. Yeah, the Pokemon cards were coming out, and that enthralled me from the first editions and the rares and the rest of it, and how the concept of having people wanting to collect more and more. So I started thinking, you know, we've got 2 puzzles, now we've got a third one. Let's get another one out there. But people were starting to tell me they were cottoning on to what I was doing. In other words, there was, you know, they started to invent their gadgets that put on the side and allowed them to map their maze out. And I'm thinking, okay, let's take what they've said and doing, and let's come up with something where they have to do that. They have to maze it, you know, and write it, you know, draw it up, and to find out what's going on. Because whilst I was doing the curvatures around the Revomaze for the black, we came up with the bronze. And I wanted something that spanned, that turned. So as you turned into it, you can go in different directions. But you can't place that onto a cylinder because of the curve. So it ended up as the but the thing is that I wanted to create something that changed the map. So we came up with something that moved. The beauty of this is I enjoy watching films, and I saw the Tomb Raider, and one of the guys pushed something on a wall, and you could hear something happening, but it happened elsewhere in the actual place. That's what I wanted to do with idea and concept of a door, that you activate the door, but it changes something else somewhere else. And they had to find that by drawing it out very carefully. And the concept behind the bronze was that this door opening had to be set, and then you had to find where it was and how it operates to be able to go into a different corridor or area. And that's what we call the dark side. You get onto the dark side of the puzzle, and you're stuck in a loop over there, and then you find, whilst you're there, everything is weird. It feels weird. The whole concept was weird. And then we put sort of clues out, things like about barns, born in a barn, which you're saying is that you're shutting the door after the horse is bolted. So you say, all right, you've got to close the door. Once you've got through, you must shut the door to be able to continue. But you don't realize that, because by shutting the door, it affects somewhere else again. And all of that sort of bubbles down, and eventually the bronze went out, and people were really starting to enjoy it. And it was taking a lot longer for people to come back, because before it was, give it a day or so and they're back to me. They were taking longer, except for one guy. And this one guy got it done in 6 hours from start to finish. And he was absolutely telling me he's absolutely so tired, because he put so much thought and effort into doing this. And he did it in 6 hours, and brilliant. Everybody else is taking up to 40 hours at that time, at least a week or so before they started to come back and started to tell me.
Well, because I think when you first released Bronze 2, I don't think you mentioned the word dynamic or anything like that. You said, all right, here's the next puzzle. So people are expecting the typical, blue and green, and then they get this bronze, like, well, what the hell? Something's not right here. Yeah.
And someone's mentioned to me, it's much more dynamic, this one, isn't it? I thought, that's a good name. We will talk about static, with things that don't move, and we talk about dynamic, things that do move. And then it got sort of enthralled with the idea of having something that moves. So yeah, from that, the other thing is that it was planned that by falling in the second half of the dark side, reset the pointer to where you had to go back, and you had to remember your route again, and all of that resetting and what have you was quite a novel method as well. And it got people even more hooked. And it started to see a tier growing. You've got the people who can do the blue or struggle to do the blue, and then you moved up to the green. They're struggling to do the green. It's taking longer. Less people were doing each one each time. As it grew, because people were still stuck on the blue. It's a bit like you've got a Rubik's Cube, which is behind you, by the way. And, you see people doing that, and it eventually ends up in the drawer, and it's months later. But I wanted to do something that people can keep going back to, and they kept picking it up and putting it down, picking it up, putting it down. But when it gets to the bronze, the dynamics, it all suddenly changed. People had to be much better with their drawing, more accurate with their drawing to see what's going on, and if they drew it carefully, you suddenly started to see the bit that they were missing. And that was an important step, and it became the forum favorite, the bronze, simply because it took it to that nth degree, where it's a bit like you get the people who just go for go-karting and stuff like that, and then suddenly you get to the full race type people, people that love to have everything there. And it seems as if it's much more sort of grown up, because it was taking so long. These are serious puzzles. These really are taking a lot of time to actually get through and solve, maybe. But they were doing it, and they were solving it, and the solving just propelled to the next level, and they wanted more. And that's, again, the more side of things. I could see that there was a collection growing, and that's where the C set started from, because the fact we wanted to say there's a blue, there's a green, there's a bronze. There was this new one that's coming up, which was the silver, and then the gold. And then we topped it up with a special, which was the titanium, and this made like a group of 6. And we sold those to what was known as the 300 Club, because this set was £300, and that, these people were paying their money up front, their hard-earned money, to have something, to be developed. And we'll get on to some of the other stuff, like the Series 2 and stuff, how it sort of transpires. But people were enjoying this, and they were sort of signed up to this and say, right, we want another one, but we want it better than the bronze. You think, well, how can you do that? How can you make it better than bronze?
So is that where the silver came in? We're like, all right, if you really want to be tortured,
Right.
and they
Yeah,
tossed out the rule book and everything.
yeah, we just said, right, we want let's bung in a few of those. Let's confuse the pants off people. Let's put something in there that people would say, well, the hell's happening here? I'm going all the way round here and round. Where can I go? I can only go round. I can't do anything other than go round. And that's the motorway in the silver. And the silver had this point where you had to get to the motorway. So how do you cross it? And you get the people starting to cheat and jump and bang and other things. And this sort of resulted on things. But by being in 2Q, I didn't get the first feedback until somebody started getting into the second half of the puzzle, which they got into the first half and eventually got through it, which was amazing because it had. And suddenly you started to hear people getting into the other area using a which is part of the silver. But this other area, I was starting to get complaints that people were getting stuck and can't seem to get out. So I had one of them returned. And when I got it back, one of the...
Okay, so I'm censoring this part as well. He talks about a specific component within the silver, and essentially the pin hits a certain component that causes a little divot in it, and because of that it could break the component and it no longer works. So he goes into the specifics of the component, and I thought it'd be best just to cut that out because I think some people would consider that a spoiler. So I wanted to be on the safe side and decided to censor that. So that's what's going on here in this moment.
Nick started. That Nick just kept growing, and eventually you couldn't solve it. So I was getting a couple of people in the same boat. So what do you have to do? Do you leave a paperweight for people to be disappointed with? So I literally made the decision to redo all the 100 that I'd made, and literally give out another 100 of these puzzles. It's literally crucified me because it costs so much to have them redone. I put a few more mods in to basically to make it a little bit better as well. So to try and make it, but I sent out all these puzzles to everybody, and the issue 1 went to issue 2. And that was my first taste of negativity, it's other than Blue Handgate and what have you.
Is that kind of why you decided to kind of have that note on there, like, I won't be, making silver until 2029, just to kind of all the work that went into it and things like that? Or is there something else that kind of spurred that note for silver?
But the thing about the silver is that it has so many components. It's you're talking hundreds of hours average. There's one guy that can do it in 20 minutes, which is phenomenal, and get around it in 20 minutes. And repeatedly as well. But others, were spending a lot longer than the bronze. The bronze seemed to sort of like get to a known point, and people were spending maybe a week. Now we're talking years, and eventually it transpires that some people run it for at least 5 years, 6 years, maybe even 10 years. And suddenly they pick it up and eventually just have that impetus to have another crack at it. And all of a sudden they solve it, after all this time. It's been sat there tormenting them, knowing that some people have been able to crack it, and then all of a sudden they crack it and they've opened it up and they're delighted. But the thing is that it's such a challenge to introduce a lot of people to it. Meant there's so much work that needs to go into, first of all, creating the puzzle, and we'll bring you onto the salmon after this. But the thing about the silver was it was at the nth limit. People, even Chris, who set up for him, he made his match with the silver, and I didn't like that. I still want people to solve the puzzles. I still want people to eventually achieve it if they put the effort in. But there are limits to what people can capable of, and I don't like seeing puzzles sitting in drawers not doing anything. I'd like them to at least have the opportunity to get to the end and get a reward for all their effort. We have something called the Keswick to Barrow here, which is a 40-mile walk. It's quite an in-depth thing, right through the hills and what have you. But the thing is that some people can run it in 5-6 hours or 5 hours. Brilliant. Some people actually run to the start and run all the way back again. Some people actually run even further than that. It's ridiculous. But people like myself, I decided to do it, 50-year-old at the time, to do this walk. Bought some new trainers and everything the day before, and no fitness, and I'm not exactly the fittest of people. And me and my wife did it, with my son, and we put the challenge there. But it took us 16 hours. We eventually got to the end, absolutely plumb last night on, except for somebody on crutches. But we achieved it. We got a medal. We said we've achieved this 40-mile walk. So I was just so happy that we achieved the end. And it's that feeling of satisfaction that we reached the end of a major challenge. That the silver got to that point where I felt like I was, we've got to have an enjoyment out of things, and just making things so difficult was not really the ideal. So we want to try and be clever, but we came up with other concepts and other mazes that try to sort of like capture the good parts of others. Like the orange came out from a competition simply because of that. We wanted to be able to give people the opportunity to come up with their own designs, and then we used a panel, different people like the engineers, myself and Chris and a few others, who basically judged all the different drawings and what we came up with. And there's the one that came out was a great theme of castles and that, which was the basis of the orange. And it was great to have that. And then we basically made a few modifications to make sure it works. But you've got a sort of bronze in there to a certain degree, but a different way of going about the maze. And it's a bit of a green in there and other bits and pieces. And when we talk about some of our specials that we're working with a couple of our customers on, they've taken it even further, literally. They've taken the 2 mil pin into consideration, and stuff like that, and make it so damn complicated.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of the copper, the 2 millimeter pin, that's one of, all right. So actually, that's one of my favorites, and I think this is kind of a question that people want to know. So what has been kind of your least favorite and most favorite to date of Revomaze that you've made?
The blue is still technically my favorite, because I can solve it. I can solve it relatively quickly, so I can show people the concept and idea without having too much thought. The others take up too much of my time, and I've got too much of an active mind, to sit there and solve something which I've already solved. So anything like the green, I've solved that once, and I never do the green again. It's one of those challenges that once you've solved it, you just put it on the shelf and you say, yeah, I've done it. And it's a bit like my Keswick to Barrow walk. I just left it there, and that's as far as I go. I don't like doing it again and again. But we're also starting to get feedback from people who said, look, these are too hard. We want something easier. So we've got the aqua and we've got the turquoise that sort of round about the blue mark. And I enjoy those ones as well, simply because I can solve them. I enjoy things I can show people. And if I can't show people, like if you give me a silver to show someone, I've solved a silver once and that's it. Again, it's one of those puzzles you put on the side. But I've got the luxury that I can actually put them into clear sleeves and things, so I can solve them by seeing what I'm doing. And it makes life so much easier when you've got sight and you can see where you're going and to get around it. That's going back to QA and the other things that you want to talk about. We want to basically have the mechanism. How do we check, make sure these things function? Well, I need to be able to get around the maze. So we've got a very specific clear sleeve we use here that we can see what we're doing and then test every component and area around. But again, it's the green, I suppose, is still my nemesis. If someone gave me a green, I can't solve it. And my most favorite is still the blue, because I grew with the blue. I made the blue. It's that personal effect, whereas the other, have been machined by a company. Even though they're my designs, at the end of the day, the making of it has been taken away from me, other than the handmade. Even here with the machine now, the machine actually takes over. I've run over 150 puzzles, mazes since Saturday. The machine's literally been working every minute, other than between 2 and 4 and 6 in the morning, to do the next batches and stuff. But do I feel any connection with those mazes as much as I did with the blue that I made on my own machine? Literally. even though that the blue was not to script, I drew it out and I made some mistakes. Instead of going 2 steps forward, I went 4 steps forward. So it went into the wrong bit. And I ended up changing the design. In fact, the main reset line in the center actually had a slight going up and then goes across and then up, because it's a mistake. So when we came to the engineers making it, we told them to draw it straight, and we left a few of the mistakes in so that they just sort of like turn into little notches. But the bottom line with it is that favorite blue, Revo 1 is still my favorite. I used to love taking it to the shows and allowing people to open it, because even though they've opened their own blue, it's nice that they could open the blue first one. The first one came on. It's a bit like Rubik's. He had a wooden puzzle, his wooden one. It's a bit like if you're really into Rubik's and you wanted to try his wooden one out. It's a bit like that, but it's stuck in a museum now. But there's a guy, Christian, who's got the Revo one. That's one of the things I do, is I try to share what I do with people rather than have my own big collections of stuff. And it's there for the collectors out there. And again, with the blacks, I wanted people to make sure that they know that I've not made any more blacks. Not ever going to. I've had so many requests to do it behind the scenes and everything. I won't do it. You can't, because if it gets known, that's it. Everybody will be so disappointed. So the importance of working with the customer is great. It's a hindrance as well as a benefit. You learn, it restricts you if you say the wrong thing. And again, there's been a lot of that happening.
Yeah. So then at one point you switched, kind of from, going to a machinist to kind of eventually machining in-house. And during that switch, is that when you kind of decided to come up with the V3?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. The V3 was, okay, the engineers are a production shop. I have to take an order to them for one particular maze to have at least 250 done to make it worth their while, because of the setup time and all the the machine processes. To get the cost to a reasonable level, you have to manufacture a certain amount, but there is a limit on the machine. So when you come down to it, the machine costs, say, £40 an hour, and they can make possibly up to about 4 to 6 mazes an hour. There's only so much you can get in. So if you want 1,000, it's not going to change that 40 quid. You've reached the capacity. You might have 3 or 4 machines, so you can do it quicker, but you can't make the product any cheaper. And that's where the problem lies.
Did you try introducing the Obsession at this time to try and make it cheaper, or is this kind of something else later?
No, that was something completely separate, and I'll come on to that.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, the V3 has primarily been brought about because we haven't got the volume to satisfy the needs of the production house, and it made it very difficult because I had to fork up my own money at times to bring in, to get the, people say, where's all the money going? And that it's primarily gone into machinery, gone into time and effort. There's not a great amount that I've taken out of what I've been doing, but going into an order that's massive, you're talking 30, 40, 50,000 pounds at a time, you have to find that and you have to work it through. And it became more difficult, especially when people started seeing problems like with the silver. As soon as you start getting problems coming in, to go back to the production house to get them to change everything, it's difficult. And not only that, they turn around and say, no, I've already made 200 over there. Well, can I use them? No, if there's a mistake on them. So the V3 was a way and mechanism to bring it in-house, which is the primary goal, so that I could actually have the ability to make my own mazes at any time. I can prototype, I can design, and then when I've got the program running, like with us 150, 160 I did, literally running one after the other, just switch programs straight away and it does it. And that's the beauty that I've been doing. That's what's taken a larger chunk of time to get to that point, especially for a hobbyist, because that's roughly what you could say I am, into designing something that you can actually get into a sort of mass production without getting into mass production. but I couldn't do the sleeves simply because I made the sleeves on the other maze, on like my first one, but it was so difficult to remove so much material. You're talking about a 2-inch bar, of which you're taking out a 20, at least a half of it from the center, and to even put running drill through, or putting boring bars through, takes so much time and effort that you're talking nearly 2 hours maybe to run one sleeve, to drill it and to process it. So it was a non-starter. You need a bigger machine, and to have a big machine, I haven't got space. So the engineers are doing the sleeves, but I want to do my mazes, but my machine that I've got here couldn't do what's known as the Y-axis, which is the up and down cuts that are required to do the 7 sides, and also other things we want to be able to do. So what we ended up with is the engineers actually taking over, doing the body and the end based on the gold that we did. So we could actually change the maze. So we made something which was static, and then we can put whatever maze we want onto that static mass-produced component. And to make life easier, rather than making it in brass and what have you, and taking that, which the cost would have been quite high just for processing it, we ended up saying we'll do it in stainless because we don't want to tarnish the surface. We want it so that we can actually have a finish, which it worked, but it still didn't satisfy some of the collectors who like the really shiny plated versions. But the plated in itself has been nothing but a real headache from the word go, simply because the maze itself has to go into the sleeve. So any form of plating adds material, which means you have to make the actual core undersized, so the material doesn't build up enough to make it. So sometimes when they don't put enough on, it's fairly loose, and if they put too much on, it won't go through. So we had that, and the mazes also created things like called eddy currents, and where you've got a nice sharp edge, you get like a round dome forming on the edge where it curved it, which allowed people to get from one level up, climb up, because it made this curve too much. So it's very hard to get that right. Plus the fact they had to get a pin through the actual maze. So some mazes we couldn't get the pin through because it was too, the material had actually narrowed it. So plating was real hard, and to make the surface nice, it had to be plated. We tried lecherous plating, which doesn't really have much material, but it gives the benefit of hardness to the actual brass to make it a bit more sustainable when you're going around with a pin. And again, we're going to announce something on this that we're doing right now, because in effect, everything we've done with the maze has been a progression of steps that have been governed by what people say and what they do. And going on to the plastic, that came about simply because every time we went to the stands and shows, people coming up and says, I'd love this for my son, but it's too heavy. He'll throw it, and you don't want to throw things this sort of weight around, and they're dangerous when they're heavy.
So that's where it came from. So is that kind of that feedback from kind of a parent at that time, huh?
Yeah, the parents were coming up and they're saying their son absolutely enjoy this. Why don't you make it in plastic? Well, first of all, we went through so many places to see if it could be molded, and none of them said it's impossible to do, simply because of the thickness. If you ever look at a sleeve, it's quite chunky. So you'd need to fill it with holes to make it so that it's light. You'd need some form of skeleton structure because it has to be oval. When things cool, they contract. So your oval doesn't turn over anymore. It's got to be absolutely perfectly round. And if you start remilling it through, you're adding extra processes which cost money, and it starts to snowball. And then the maze itself, you can't make the maze because it'll rip it apart when the mold comes apart. So even Hasbro in America tried to take it to China to get the Chinese to make it, and they couldn't. So how do we do it? How do we make our plastic ones? Well, we machine them. They're literally on the same machines. And what happened was one Saturday, because I was working down there with them, we sat down and said, let's chuck a bit of plastic through. And that's how it came about. We threw this plastic through, and it worked, and it came out cleaner than I thought it was going to. So we said, well, let's make a few of these. So they did. They made about 100 or 200 of these things. And the sleeve, I thought, right, let's look at the sleeve and how we can maybe change it. So that's because we've got a dull color. Let's make it more interesting by putting a shrunken sleeve on. I don't know if you've seen the Marmite jars or anything, any of the food industry jars where they've got the plastic label and it's shrunk down onto the actual glass. So it gives like a peel it off and maybe. The advantage of that is that you can make it so that you can shrink these sleeves on and you can have whatever you want. You can print whatever you want on these things. And they did some samples. I think it came out to about £500 or £600 just to have about 5 of these things done. Excuse me. But what they did, when they shrink it down, the plastic has to go behind something so it doesn't peel off the edge. So we created the new sleeve, which was completely flat with a nice curve, and it had this little lip at the bottom.
Yep. The V2 here. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, that's you can see on the edge there, it's got this little lip. That little lip was designed for this label to go down and heat shrink, and it pop into there so that it would actually finish it off nicely and make it a bit easier. But
so that
the
little, that little lip right there.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's the little lip. That's the one. That's Kitty. You know, we're talking about the black. We've got the black here as well, which we'll talk about in a second. But anyway, the thing was though is that it transpired that this was not so bad, you know, and they were made for about £6 each. So I sold them for 15 quid plus VAT, or it works out as about 19.99. And we went to a show with say about 250 of these things, and we sold them out in the first day. It went out the door like that. So we had thousands made, and they went out the door like that as well. They just kept selling, and we was onto a winner with it because people were saying these are lovely and smooth and still work the same way and still give you the same thing. It just feels a little bit numb. It feels as if we got our, these latex gloves on. Yeah, it's not quite the same as the metal with a nice tactile feel coming back to you. This is a bit more nullified, but it still gave you the puzzle. It gave the concept of the puzzle.
So why did you kind of stop with the obsession? Because it seems like, I mean, it was good coming from a business perspective and easier to kind of get out. Was it just kind of like feedback? People just really liked the metal, the more collectors, the people that have been with you a while, or kind of how did that happen?
How did it happen? Right. Well, what happened is that the engineers priced it wrong. They were charging me £3 a maze and £3 for a sleeve. They should have been charging me £15 for the maze and nearly £12 for the sleeve, which basically, when you multiply it out, should have been more like 50, 60, 70 quid each, not 15 quid plus VAT. So this came about just before a show, and they caught onto it and says, we're not doing it. So I got a show booked and the rest of it. I had no material. They gave me nothing to take with me. So I went to a show where we had nothing left. And it also transpired that the guy who was managing the place was actually quite temperamental. And what he did, he was getting frustrated with the plating company, and decided to change the plating company overnight, and went to a new guy. He says, oh, we can make that for you. We can do that for you. Not realizing it's directly on brass, what have you. He screwed them up. He gave them 400 mazes to do, metal mazes, and all of them were burnt, oversized, all that problem that I told you about. It's by changing from one guy who knew what they were doing to this other guy who didn't know what he was doing, we ended up with a whole load of rubbish. And I said, I can't accept these. I can't do them. I can't use them. And because of that, they had to remake them all and then send them back to the original guys to actually do. And the guy decided to put the brakes and everything. I couldn't get to Adrian anymore. I couldn't get to develop anymore and stuff like that, and became quite strained. So I had to change engineers. And I went from one frying pan into another with a change to Merck. And Merck themselves were okay, and they developed stuff with me, but they took most of the designs and rebuilt them and stuff. And we added a few extras, like the orange came from Merck. But again, they were production and they were having their own problems. And they also gave me problems like undersized sleeves, because a guy decided to do 200 sleeves over a weekend without QAing them and ending up with the actual grooves in the wrong place. So the actual grooves were shifted. So you got around that by actually taking off the grooves and then redoing it again, which made the actual sleeve smaller by about a millimeter on each side. So yeah, we had an issue with them, and eventually we had to move from them. We ended up with where we are at now with Dawson's, and Dawson's are absolutely fantastic.
Well,
But
and I think, sorry to kind of interrupt, but I don't take too much more of your time, but I think that's kind of interesting. And we talked about before is that I think you were pretty active in the community kind of early on, but I don't think you have the luxury now. And that's one thing that I've appreciated talking to, is there are some of these engineering challenges that you just once you hear about it, they're kind of oh yeah, that makes sense, but you just sometimes the community isn't generally up to speed on things. You don't kind of hear about all the stuff behind the scenes. So I know, I think it's kind of a good time to kind of bring up the salmon, because yeah, when you have the pre-orders, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you have 30, 40, 50,000 quid to machine these off. I mean, it's a large upfront cost, so it makes sense to kind of change in house. So I think the salmon at the time is when you were kind of changing in house to as well. So there was a lot of stuff going on.
The problem with okay, let's move into the salmon, because obviously you get to a stage, you can see we're driven by people's demand for more. Everybody wants more, and you get to a design change and what have you, and you think, right, that's fairly straightforward. I got the machine in, and it took a lot longer to get in, mainly because this is a private house. It's not a factory or anything like that, so it didn't have three-phase mains. So the first thing I had to do was get mains here, and that took quite an effort to actually get the three-phase mains into the property. Now I've got the three-phase mains into the property, which practically killed me, because I had to they only did it to the actual boundary. So I had to take it myself and from the boundary to the actual box for them to actually connect it. And in doing so, I did quite a bit of damage to myself. But the thing is that you get into there, you think, right, I've got the mains in, I've got the machinery on order. And it's an expensive piece of machinery that, first of all, will it fit? When it arrived, we didn't take into account the skids that had to go on to get the thing in. So it was literally about that to get through the door. But we actually got it in, and we got it all settled, and we got the machine up and running. And we did run a couple of test pieces, just to prove that the machine functions, which it did, and impressed. But then the learning curve starts, because you have to learn Siemens, and you have to learn how to use shop turn, and other packages. Whereas before, I used to just do G code. Now we're having to learn something new. And the tooling, you had to learn the tooling, because it's not only getting the tooling, it's getting the right tooling that fits. Because the machine I've got is immensely compact. It's a tight machine, but it's too tight, because every tool you put in, you have to make sure it doesn't hit the back plane and stuff like that, and move around. So you haven't got the luxury of lots of air around the actual tooling. So even putting a drill in or anything, you have to make sure that it fits. So
all this is going on, the clock is ticking on getting salmon made, right?
And then the salmon itself, the design of the salmon had so many small parts, and these small parts we had to create, but we had to machine both sides. So when you look at maybe one of the, you had to machine one side, turn it around to machine the other side. And it's that turning around that we had the major issues with, because obviously to get the actual component to actually do, we can machine one side easily, but then we had to create the chucks that held the part by modifying the chucks to give us the ability to centralize it, to make sure that the second half was done exactly where the other half was done. And also we had to do it in such a way that it left just enough material to keep it there without it falling, because if it falls, it hits the cutter and the cutter takes a chunk out of it because they're so small. So we just literally got round and round, and eventually, to try and get the salmon, it's just going on and on and on, trying to do it. Plus the fact we had to continue, working with other mazes and other bits and pieces and getting those out and orders. We had to keep having an order base coming in. We've not got the luxury that I am actually employed elsewhere and then have this as a hobby. This is my job. This is where my income is, and I have to support the family and all the rest of it. So the bottom line was I had to not only juggle that side, I had to also juggle stuff that I can do quickly and get those out of the way, and then return back. And obviously I haven't got the luxury of having a machine that's working quite merrily over there and a machine that I can sit down and develop on.
So that time frame that you're thinking salmon is quickly and rapidly just getting out of control. Yeah, so that makes sense. I mean, people are saying like salmon, like, oh, he's still selling blue and green, but where's my damn salmon? But then they don't see about the challenges and some of that. So it's interesting.
I've learned the hard way twice. I think the salmon was the V side of it, the V1 side of it. The R2s. The R2s was an absolute disaster, simply because when I put the idea and concept forward of having 10 puzzles with 100 people, and you're going to bring that out.
Yeah, the R2. There we go.
Yeah, the R2. There he is. Yeah. Now the R2 itself is brilliant, but the first responses back was it's a bit loose, and I can get into areas which I wasn't supposed to get into because I seem to have solved it without actually getting to the end part. So when you start hearing stories like that, you think, okay, you've got to be able to tighten it and what have you. So we started to do some modifications, and the whole thing developed into, right, I really need to have like a proper constant height for the puzzle to operate successfully, because without it, if it varies in height, then the pin varies and obviously it doesn't work. So how do I do that? Well, the machinery that I originally had, which I did though Jupiter and all of the Mercuries that you've seen, plus the original Venus, this machine was so difficult to run. Everything was literally done by hand. So I was expecting it to press a button and off you go, like I'm in now. I can do my blues and greens and the rest of it by pressing a button, and just every one comes off. We do a spot check to make sure it's right. It's perfect. And you line them all up perfect. This thing was very, dramatically. So one was loose, next one was tight, and I had to fight every single one. And because I only charged £100 for each one at a time, I didn't put that cost in correctly. I overpromised. I admit that. I've overdone things. I tried to satisfy a marketplace that was crying out for this stuff, and I wasn't capable with the equipment I had. Mentally, I was capable, and that's the problem. My mental capability and my actual to-do capability was off mark, and I started to let people down, and make promises, not keep those promises, and slide and what have you. And that's why when we started to get people in, the other thing was I got a turnaround of staff, which didn't help, because I was getting to a stage where the people that were coming here were getting the legacy flack all the time, and the legacy flack just didn't seem to go away. They came up with these routines, and they're going to take over and do things, and we never got down to it, because at the same time we have to pay and keep going, and we had to have money coming in somewhere. And this fight between the two was starting to affect the whole operation. But people that are with me or have been with me have been so tolerant, unbelievably tolerant, with belief that they eventually get what they put their money into, that I can't let them down. I won't let them down. Now, the bottom line is I won't let them down, simply because my passion to complete is always there, even though it's taking a major toll, on the family, on everything. But it has to be complete. for it to be ever deemed to be a success. Would I deem this project to be a success? Not until I finished. And I'm in a position where I can run these things off whenever I want. Press a button, I can get somebody else to do it. And off they go, and they do it to the right standard. The Salmon was the classic, going backwards. We moved forwards, and then suddenly the Salmon brought us backwards again. Even with the Merc Black is another one.
Yeah, but I think that's one thing that's good about this interview is that this will kind of give people an inside perspective of what's happening, and then also I know me because I've had some inside information been helping you is that that's why you kind of did what you did with the gray. You kind of took that feedback from the community and tried to improve and get things lined up.
The gray was designed to be straight from design into prototype, under testing, into production, and out the door when people pay their money. That was the design, and we got there. To be honest, we actually got there on that, and in effect, that showed we can be capable of doing things when we set the right level and set the right amount of resource towards it and stuff like that. But people will say, well, hang on a minute, the gray's come out after the Salmon. I realized very quickly that Salmon was way, way beyond. It's like a double silver. And it got to a stage where it was so, very tiny steps involved that to have a problem was catastrophic. And we suddenly, when we tested the puzzle, we tested it such that we used our clear sleeve and we tested to make sure we get into the areas and make sure we didn't test certain hugging that people were actually starting to do, and suddenly you think, hang on a minute, they can hug and get back into an area that will lock them out. Oh, damn it. That's really bad. So we had to modify. So not only did we have trying to get something out, then saying, right, we can't stop. We've got to put this modification in. Otherwise people can end up with paperweights. So we put this modification in. So the pin can't get into this area, which is not supposed to, even though that's not where they're designed for. And then the hugging side of things is we're trying to avoid it as much as possible because we're machining at different levels. The cuts leave lines, and sometimes people can follow the lines, with enough pressure and stuff. So we've stepped back and we've actually redone it. And we've actually got to a stage where we stopped any further selling or moving of Salmon until we're completed. And we've got a few, we've got about 10 that's sitting on the side, and they're only waiting for one thing, and that's the white boxes that have due to arrive next week. They're ready to go out, and that's the Salmon out of the way. Yay. Do I then bring the Salmon back?
Maybe wait a little bit.
Yeah, it's the same with the silver. If we're going to bring the silver back, we're going to have to make it. Now, does that mean we have to make it V3? Well, yeah, I suppose it would mean we'd have to make it V3 because we wouldn't have the opportunity to do it. Having said that, someone wanted a lime, and we haven't got any V1 limes anywhere. So we transferred the program that done the V3 lime onto the billet. So we now have a lime on a billet, a full-length V1 billet that we used for the Merc. So we're able now to take any of the original designs and turn them into V1s. But we have to take it from that machine and put it onto the Denford to machine the slots, the hex ends, and then we have to machine the ends off and turn the maze down. So all of that, in fact, we don't need to turn the maze down because we can do that on the main machine. But the thing is, though, is that we are able to do that, use the V1s, but it takes a hell of a long time, and getting it right and getting the other bits and swatch machines, it's so much easier to have something where we can just plug things in, screw them up and tighten them up and go into the actual maze and off you go. Because we know how long it takes. And that's one of the things that Sophia's doing now behind me. She's now got this MRP Easy ERP software, allowing us to finally have all components, all manufacturing in a system that when orders come through, it tells us what our demand is requirements and how long it will take to machine and how long all the other components will take to get here and bring together. And that to me is what's been missing from day one. So if I had knowledge today and put that in place right back at the very beginning, things would have got a lot smoother, a lot easier.
Yeah, it seems like Sophia's kind of implemented like this 5 Sigma process almost. So, good job back there, Sophia. Yeah.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah.
But the thing is though, is that, she's an apprentice. She's literally taking this on. She's doing great stuff with it. And at the end of the day, we have to change our way of working. So we've got a scheduler. So if you say, right, let's get these red V3s. You think, well, we haven't got a red free. Yeah, we're thinking of a red free for some time in the future. It fits into the production planning, and it's actually put in such a way that we can actually guarantee that we can get the job done, processed and running, so we can sell it to people direct.
So I guess that's kind of next question too. Kind of a good segue. So at this point, what's kind of like the future for Revomaze? Is it continuing some advanced or some additional R1 series? Is it are you wrapping up the R2? Is it like a R3 or R4 series, or kind of like what's kind of the I'm not sure what you can talk about, but
the thing about if I bring out V3 or R3, I should say, without completing 1 and 2 is hypocritical of me to say, let's get on with it. To say that we're not doing it is also the same. We can't say we're not going to do it. But in the meantime, what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that the series 1 that's out there is complete, and everyone that's ordered anything has their order.
That's like the Black Merc, for instance, which
Black Merc, which is it's finishing off. The thing that once that's out of the way, the Black Merc, the Salmon, C sets, there's only a few of those C sets, we are good to go into the next arena, which is the R2s. The R2s have been a major burden simply because is the machine capable? Because the actual machine is 85 mil max, but it's actually 100 mil for the billets. So the machine is actually being told a lie to make it work. And it's the same with the billets. Technically, the billets won't work because the billet's that long, the drill's that long, which makes it that long. And I've only got that long in the machine. So you have to lie to the machine to make it do it. And we've learned some techniques to allow us to do that now. But we're doing things outside of the comfort zone of the machine. We can't damage the machine because it's vital to what we're doing. The bottom line is, if I took the mazes to the engineers, they would charge me nearly 5 times more than I'm actually paying now running them here, 5 times, which means A, the price would go through the roof. B, they would need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds to make it justified, which we can't do. And they'd need to put the money up front again, which is hard to do. So do we continue with that? And it makes it very difficult. Whereas at this moment, we're saying 2,500 bodies and nuts and sleeves, supply those to us over the next year. We know they're coming in and we're having them done on a regular basis, so we can go and grab more at Christmas and less in the quiet times. And all of that, we just make the mazes up to go onto the sleeves, and we choose the colors and we choose whatever we want to do and anything special. So that puts us a little bit into the driving seat. We can actually make 50 of those and 10 of those, and somebody wants one of those, we can just put that on and run it. We don't have to go to the engineers and say, can you just run one off? Which has been So yeah, it means that we can satisfy, and that's one of the plus signs. If we won't survive without V3, simply because we just haven't got the total volumatics to do it, unless we have a large amount of what we call marketing, especially like in China and stuff like that, where we develop a brand new audience, or we just try to have this uniqueness about the puzzle. And I'm going to come on to eventually some of the future directions. So yeah, Salmon, too complex. I should have learned my lesson from why I didn't want to stay with the other guys, because it was too complex, too much. So we need to go back to what people enjoy. Why was the blue so successful? Why do people like the blue? What was the informant of the first dynamic bronze? That was a really good challenge. How can we make it so that we bring forward puzzles that people enjoy, but it's open to everybody? Not this little top tier. We've got the bottom tier. We're thinking about them as well. We get the whole puzzling community enjoying the puzzles. And again, I'll look at that bottom tier again for greater effects. But overall, all the puzzles that are made, and there's over 20 of them now, each one has got a story behind it. Each one's had a knock-on effect back to the R2s and the other bits and pieces in time. Sit down, let's bring out something new to keep people interested, because it's gone quite too long. Doing that means that you're taking away from something else. So R2s are happening. The R2s are happening for the people that have bought them. All right, definitely. Once we've got the processes and making them, we know how much it is. We then have to rethink about how we're going to move forward with it. It could be that there's a price for people who haven't paid at all, but still have the Voyager status. And the only reason for bringing that in is to know what the demand, whether 100 people will be there. We've got it down to roughly about 50 people at the moment. So we've actually halved the number of people for the puzzle range, just to make sure that we fill out what we've done. But it could be that we make them general sale later on. But again, it's a loss. It's always going to be a loss until we're in a position where we can make them quite rapidly and make them accurately, and that the puzzle works perfectly. So everybody has the same level of fun. Not one person getting something that's a bit loose and nobody else, and they get into areas they can't do. Nothing worse than seeing that on the internet. You guys in Discord would be the first to criticize it if you say, "Oh, look, you can do this, bang it, and it goes into that area." Oh, great. It's not, ideally everybody's at the same, creating a puzzle that everybody has to challenge at the same rate. It's a bit like getting a Formula One racing car and making it the same for everybody. So you get 20 races doing exactly the same. The only difference is the human. That's the only difference. That's where I want to be.
Yeah.
But we're never going to be exactly there, because manufacturing is so hard, to make sure it's 100% the same for everybody. Plus the fact we get different time zones, because it's around the world as well. We're dealing with different people in different continents. We've actually sold now to practically every country other than the African countries, which is quite amazing, over the course of time. And I think we probably sold in excess of 40,000 puzzles over that time frame. But
Wow.
let's talk about the plastic. The plastic is still there. People will have it. If you want to give it to your kids, if you give it to friends, you're not going to give an expensive £100 unless it's a really special occasion. Like, for instance, we get a lot of people with retirement now saying, "There you go, you got something to play with for your retirement. Enjoy this." Whereas the kids, we want to cater for them. This bottom tier, how do we get the plastic? Well, they told us we couldn't make a molded version. We can. We've made it, and we've actually proven the concept. I just need to put the money together now to create the mold and actually get the thing in place, which allows us to make, rather than 4 or 5 an hour, which is machined versions of plastic, into 800 to 1,000 a day for one shift for one worker. And that's using a single mold rather than a double mold, which will double that to a quadruple mold.
So you're saying that those could resurface. It's one of those, you're thinking about the bottom tier. You're not closing the doors on anything. It's not like you promised, all right, these are the last obsessions, no more. This isn't the blacks where it's 20 and 20 only. So obsessions, they could come back.
Yeah, but whether we call them obsessions as such, we might call them something else to meet in. We want to build it into a theme of the whole thing so that we can actually sell the whole thing around the world. Like the Rubik's, because the Rubik's sold 400 million. There's your audience, 400 million out there who've seen in their lifetime a Rubik's Cube. And we'd like to basically put another puzzle next to it, compare it against. And I've had Rubik's champions enjoy my puzzles just as much because it's twisting with the hands, not even looking at the damn thing. Some of them, they're that clever. And they solve it. There you go, put it down the table in seconds. The idea is we have our puzzles to do the same. So the only way we can do it is to get it to the masses, give it to the kids. But it's a very short window, as is Rubik. He was in for only about 2 to 3 years and gone. 78 to whatever it was. And they disappeared. And it wasn't for the fact that they had retained the digital rights that suddenly started to snowball again. And they brought it back periodically. But they're selling like about 1 million at a time every time they do a production. The thing is, though, is that this is just another challenge, and it gives people the insight into the Revomaze, and it gives people the ability to say there's a gift for Christmas. And by the way, there's this lovely metal version out there and the history behind it. So, the girls enjoy reading the comments of people, and obviously we're concerned when people have problems or this time framing and my inability to judge correctly and say the right thing at the right time rather than saying what people want to hear. I'm saying the wrong thing. It's important to say that we've got to finish what we're doing. We have got ideas for the future with new puzzles, with another new range. But we're not going to even entertain what it's going to be or what have you until we have everything in place. And for that to be in place, those have to be cleared. All right. So that's bottom line for me. But it might be that we still bring in the occasional V1.
Yeah, but the 2mm copper style pen. I like the copper. That's one that has its own challenges, I'm sure.
Yeah. The thing about the copper is it's great as long as you don't do too much excess with it, because it's got a 2mm pin, not a 3mm, and it's a little bit more sensitive to bending. We tried to we'll be using 316, which is a bit more marine grade and a bit harder to give it a bit of strength. But the thing is, though, is that the copper gives you a larger surface to work on, a much larger surface. But again, anybody that solved a copper, there's still some real neat little challenges in there and get round. But if you can solve a copper relatively quickly, I don't even know who can do that.
No one can. No, I'm sure they're out there, but
there are definitely people who've solved it, but it's much more of a challenge. It's much more infinitely. Again, with the Revo Mini, that's a third the size. We could even bring in, say, a Revo half, which is like a half size, because we can actually manufacture the whole thing, including the sleeve here, because it's 25mm is half to 2 inch. So we can do 1 inch, no problem. But it's not quite the same as the larger in the hand. People enjoy it.
I think everyone still likes that. So just I'm trying to wrap up with 2 really quick questions. So the orange was the competition. I think people really like that. I know you guys have all this stuff in the works. You're trying to adapt the R2s into your machine, things like that. Have you thought about bringing back any other competitions, or is there any other events or things that you have potentially in the works?
We haven't actually got a plan, but the fact that the success of the orange was that it was well received. The actual puzzle was a good puzzle, and people know what they're talking about when they're designing these things. And it also gives them the scope of the issues about how to design something, because so many people started putting points in and don't realize points bend. they also have to take into consideration that when they're making a channel deeper on a curve, it goes down that way to a point, and that point gets very thin and it can bend easily, and those bits break off and end up inside jamming the puzzle. So going through the rules, we could actually do it, but if you look at some of the guys that we're working with, their puzzles their design is so damn complicated. It takes everything, the gold, the silver, everything, even the copper. So you guess how complex it is. To actually put it all together and actually manufacturing it, it's just like a Salmon plus. I think it's going to be quite a treat. I will be making 5 of them, but whether I'll be making more of them is just down to like the orange, it has to be productionable. So, and the fact is, we don't want to target just the few at the top of the tree. We want to make it entertaining for a lot more people. So if we're going to put a challenge out there, is to try to create one of the most inventive challenges without being overly complex. In other words, what can make a puzzle really enjoyable in terms of the amazing design? And
well, you see, that's actually why I think turquoise is one of my favorite beginners, is because even after all these years, you're able to still toss a few new tricks into a beginner style puzzle that I thought were pretty brilliant, and I really enjoyed turquoise. I think it's probably one of my favorite beginners.
Yeah,
it's kind of like that. It's easy to make a difficult puzzle that no one could solve, but it's challenging to make a fun puzzle that's not overly difficult.
Yeah, and when you're trying to see, when I started this whole thing off, expectations were, what the hell is this about? The expectations were quite low. So when they actually got the puzzle, it well and truly exceeded their expectation. So as you've gone through the tree of all the different puzzles, each one either satisfied or doesn't satisfy the next level, of people's expectations. Because, I can come up with a new design and say, there's a brand new puzzle for you there, and get everybody talking about it, get everybody thinking, denying it. Yeah, that's not good. I can't see that. And then when they get it in their hands and try it, wow. And people are coming back saying, this is fantastic. That's hard to achieve. It really is hard. Even Rubik tried it with his 360 thing, the ball thing. It was terrible. He really flopped on that. And he's everyone judges him for his success, and the same with myself. All the puzzles will be judged against that blue when it first came out and was underestimated. And can I capture it again? I to tell you what, I have trouble with my wife with trying to find her a birthday present or something like that she says wow to anymore, because everything's underwhelming. Because through your life you've given so many different things that she's just got so used to you. The only way I can do it is to do something completely in the opposite direction. I thought one of the biggest wows I can do is actually say, look, there's a new puzzle, go and order it, and people can order it straight away, and as soon as they get it, and then suddenly start talking about it, and wow, that's easy. Oh, hang on, no, maybe it's not so easy. And then that generate, I've looked at the BMW, because the new 4 Series, everyone's talking about it. They hate it, they love it. It's got a big kidney thingy, it's ruined it. Where's the company going? Blah, and it's generated so much talk and debate, which is good and bad, because people are saying it's bad, but the people who are driving it are saying it's great. It's fantastic. It's so much better than I thought it was going to be. And they're all taking the reviewer's word for what is beautiful, what is not, and it's subjective, isn't it? And it's the same with puzzles. What is a good puzzle? What makes people enjoy it? And it's the ability to put the time and effort in and get a reward at the end of it. And when you get the reward, the time that you've put into it is priceless. You've enjoyed it, and the fact that you can repeat instantly, you now know the solution, you now know how to do it. Magic is another thing. Magic is brilliant when you see someone who's very good at it until you see exactly what they've done, and then you think to yourself, oh, is that all? Is that how they do it? And the whole thing drops. Whereas you need something to be able to say, let's do that again, and show it again. And I think one of the best tricks I ever did was like with 6 coins. You line them up and you show someone your routine. You've got 3 moves. You've got to get it from that shape to that, and you show them it. And then you put it back together, but you put it back together slightly differently, so that when people look at it, they go, oh. And then even though they've looked at it, they still get it wrong. They just can't follow it. And it's the enjoyment of watching people say, yeah, I can do that. Oh, hang on a minute. It's that I want to try and achieve. I want to try and find a puzzle that people enjoy, say it's fantastic, love to explain it to people and say, whatever, here's a great puzzle. And then end up, recommending it to friends and family and what have you. And then move on and say, look, I need something new to play in, a new challenge, and exceed that expectation and keep doing that through the series.
Yeah.
And I've learned the hard way.
Yeah, there's some speed bumps along the way. So, I have a few more questions, but I think with what you said, I think that's a good place to wrap up. So maybe we'll do a part 2 down the road sometime. So, because there's such a wild and long history of the Revomaze that it's just hard to encompass.
13 years, yeah.
13 years. But with what you said, I think that's a good spot to end. So, no, thank you for your time and answering a lot of these questions. So, I know I've been looking forward to this. I know several people are looking forward to watching this. So, really appreciate you sitting down with me and talking today.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, take care, Chris, and
yeah.
Good luck with the future of Revomazes and the continue to check out the back orders.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which we're getting close now with the aid of the people behind me, which has been fantastic. Yeah. So they really are good. All right.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, thanks, Chris.
No problem. Take care.
Well, thanks, Chris, for joining. I really enjoyed it, and it was a great opportunity to kind of learn some of the insights of the Revomaze puzzle. So again, subscribe and be part of the Revomaze Discord community to enter to win the blue Revomaze obsession. Also, I'm going to be releasing a V2 video discussing the V2 Revomazes, and I'll be giving away a bronze and a green V2 Revomaze. So again, to be part of that entry, I'll have more details later, but you'll need to be part of the Revomaze Discord and subscribed as well. There were still a lot of questions that I had for Chris, but I felt that I was just losing the attention and it was just going on too much. So I felt naturally that was a good place to stop. So if you really like the interview with Chris and you want to see more, leave a comment below if you're interested. If there is enough interest, hopefully me and Chris will do a part 2. I know that, I wanted to step through the Revomaze timeline. I really wanted to talk about, Indigo, for instance, how, Shane came about and helped create that, because that's a fascinating story, in and of itself. I want to discuss the handmade, all kinds of things, but, we just ran out of time. So, if you, found this interview interesting and you want to see part 2, comment or shoot me a message and let me know. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Revodeity, signing out.